Our life was centered, our marriage was centered around the ministry. And we were taught not to separate really the two. And yet at the same time, it should have been separated.
If it wasn't according to her plan, it wasn't going to happen.
It's a typical cult like that. By that time, I didn't really recognize that. My parents' marriage was not healthy. They finally divorced with my mom's sister having an affair with my father.
For a child that experiences trauma, there's multiple paths that they can take. There's no concrete answer. So on one hand, they may feel very familiar with the type of abuse or trauma they suffered and find themselves in continuous situations. Or on the other hand, it was so detrimental that they will do everything possible not to repeat or enter any other situations connected to the trauma.
My mom was a single mom, raising 2 daughters. We had days when we didn't know what we were going to eat next. We ate veggie chunks and drank sugar water.
My dysfunctional background is one of the reasons why I ended up in the cult. And I don't want to be so black and white that my parents were all bad. They were human beings. They had strengths and weaknesses, and they did the best they could according to what they were taught.
So what you see in the recruitment tactics of destructive cults is typically deception, a bait and switch con, and initially when people become involved, there's a phenomenon that has been called love bombing. That is seemingly unconditional love being extended to somebody who's initially coming in contact with the group.
I do remember that it was a church that my mom found, and she told me and my sister about the church, and we just went to visit one Sunday, and it was something that I can never forget.
I thought it was a little weird. It was different. I wasn't accustomed to some of the things that they were doing. They were very charismatic, very interpersonal.
I was first introduced to the cult via a childhood friend. That childhood friend is actually the cult leader's youngest child. So to me, it was just a church that a childhood friend's family ran.
My introduction to the church was actually through my sister. She connected with a group of friends who, was going to these Bible studies. They were going to Bible studies, and, everyone that was young or youthful seemed to be drawn to it.
Everyone kind of just bombarded us, and it was just like, we just met you, but we love you kind of thing. And we were just I think it was a bit much. So it wasn't until a few months later that we went back for a second visit. And after that second visit, we pretty much stayed.
In my professional experience, those individuals that find themselves in a controlling or an abusive situation are those that usually are looking for some type of comfort, some type of acceptance, or in many cases, it's been what they have been brought up in.
It wasn't until my late 20s when I was going through my life's defining crisis, my defining crisis moment, where I was just down, and I said, I'm going to go and to their home because I always felt peace whenever I visit them. And I just didn't leave for 4 years, basically.
In the beginning, I was growing. I became the assistant pastor of this church. I was head of the men's ministry, part of the worship team, praise and worship team, one of the praise leaders there.
There are no checks and balances. It's like a woman that felt called to be a pastor and started her own denomination and keeps meeting broken people.
Cult leaders seem to be very similar in their personality profiles. They seem to have very little ability to have empathy or even sympathy regarding anyone other than themselves.
She had instilled so much fear in us that if we left, or if we even thought about leaving, that we would be punished. We were like basically estranged from our family. You know, they hadn't seen us in years. Where are you gonna go? What are you gonna do? You live with them, you eat with them, you sleep with them, you work with them. To leave would have to be, it was almost like suicide to leave. And then even if like you did decide to leave, it had to be a plan.
I started to notice things that were a little odd. You know, the methodologies, the practices, the treatment and behaviors of, you know, other members that were there, including my own family. And I was manipulated into thinking that my family didn't love me, or I was the black sheep of the family, and that the true love that was for me to experience was actually from the leader of that church and her family.
The cult leader sets it up by saying, by skewing the scripture, that Jesus only told certain people certain things.
The leader said that she got a word from God about me. And this word was basically that I was not ready for school. I guess mentally, like I didn't have the maturity to go to college. You know, God is saying that I need to leave school, I need to drop out. And if I don't, then I'm gonna die.
We believed God. And we believed God through this leader. You get desensitized to the outside reality and identity of who you are.
Other members would talk about death. Oh, so-and-so left and that person died. And then so-and-so left and, you know, we got a vision that, you know, that they're gonna die soon, kind of thing. So it was just like death was always kind of like looming in the back of your mind. You know, well, if I do this, then I'm gonna die. You know, if I start watching this show or listening to this type of music or going to this type of place, then I'm gonna die.
I didn't call her Pastor so-and-so. I call her Mom, sometimes in front of my own mother, which I now regret, because it's wrong. She was no mother to me. She was my cult leader. I have a mother.
The church had a very prominent, I should say, role to my marriage, because we got married on the anniversary, on the church's anniversary. You know, when you're married to the pastor's daughter, dealing with a pastor like we had, she's going to be all up in your business. And so that's where the conflict came, because now it's exposing your weaknesses.
Most of the members were living with the leader at the time. Throughout, actually, I lived with her at one point.
So there are many incarnations of groups called cults. What they all have in common are, I think, three core characteristics. Number one, the group has an absolute authoritarian leader. And then number two, that leader uses coercive persuasion and influence techniques to gain undue influence over the people in the group. And then finally, number three is that the group does do harm.
It was easy in the beginning, okay in the middle, A little difficult towards the end, very bad when it was all over.
Humanity became difficult, like sleep, exercise, feeling rested. And the fact that that's the way that you do stuff, and the premise that it's attainable for any Christian, and it's burnout.
It was always a conflict because she tried to control what I did with my kids. You know, my kids, they don't like some of the things that go on there. And so they're having their little struggles and their battles.
So what keeps people in those situations primarily is hope. Hope that it will get better. Hope that it will change. Hope that this is a one-time situation. Hope that what they walked in being promised is what they will receive.
And that means that everybody is going to give everything all the time. Everything, all your time and all your money, go to this thing that you started to believe in because you came in lost. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
My ex-wife's mother required obedience on all fronts. So the expectation for me, being her husband at that particular time, and the assistant pastor, fell on me. It was a heavy responsibility.
So I think the lowest point for me when I was there was when I was pregnant. You know, all that love that they were trying to show us in the beginning when we first started going there, it was like out the door. And they treated me like I was nothing because I was pregnant and I wasn't married. And I remember she put her hand on my belly and she was like, if you don't get it together, in 6 months you're gonna die. And in 6 months I was gonna give birth to my child.
And so the love is not unconditional. It's actually highly conditional. The condition that is there is that you must capitulate. You must go with the flow of the group. You must submit to their authority and subordinate yourself to the group and follow the leader.
During this particular time that my ex-wife and I, we were separated. And we were living in two different places. And I had received a phone call from one of my daughters. And she was crying hysterically, you know. She was asking, Daddy, where are you? We need you to come home because X, Y, and Z. Mom was going through this with Grandma. And I fell on my knees and I just cried. And I said, God, I cannot do this. That was my emotional breaking point right there. Like, I couldn't do it anymore.
Just before I left, something happened. I don't feel comfortable giving all the details because it involves minors and things like that.
Can you shed any light? Anything that you, I guess.
Honestly, I could say maybe there were some sexual things that happened between certain minors. And I basically left and I went to a Christian counselor. I was talking to her for about like 3 minutes and she put her pen down and she's like, you need to get out of there.
It wasn't my plan to have a child without being married. I always wanted to be married, but it just didn't work out that way. And I just felt like well, what am I gonna do? I knew I had to leave. I knew I had to get out, and I wasn't sure where we were gonna go and how it was gonna happen. But when I was pregnant, that's when I knew.
Most of the times you do not get out these situations alone. You get out these situations with assistance from someone else.
that night I said to myself, I'm leaving. I wasn't leaving my family. I wasn't leaving my wife or my kids. This is what I said that night in my mind. I said, I'm leaving this situation. And I said, I'm going to call my mother and I'm going to see if she could come and pick me up.
I roomed with someone. I left like a Tuesday, went to my mother's and never went back. I had like 2 months left on the lease, and I said to her, I'm going to pay my lease portion. Don't worry about it. I'm not coming back.
Well, my husband and I had decided to get married during that time while I was pregnant, and he was the one who was there, you know.
So the abuse has a cycle, and the cycle is a 3-part cycle. And you have the honeymoon phase where everything is grand and everything is great. And then you have this stage where there's the buildup, and there's fighting, there's bickering, you're not sure what's going on, but something seems a little off. Then you have what we call the explosion. But what's next? The honeymoon phase. So sometimes it's hard to tell when someone is actually done, because they might just be in that phase of everything's fine, everything's okay, all is well. And it takes one connection, one interaction with the previous abuser to jump right back into it. That's the cycle of abuse.
She wanted me to leave her church, leave everything. And I wanted to come back, only for the sake of my kids. And that was all that I knew at the time. I wanted to come back. But she wasn't trying to hear it. And I think by her doing that, by her kicking me out and not allowing me to come back to the church, it actually saved my life. Little did she know, she did me a favor.
You know, we still kind of felt like a part of us was there, because my husband's mom was still going to the church at the time. My mom was still going to the church at the time. So we still felt that connection, even though we weren't there. We weren't going.
It's been now 4 years since I left. It took maybe about 2 years to feel comfortable. It also took years to feel comfortable and trust leaders, spiritual leaders. And then, because when you're in the church, you kind of freeze time. So you still have some of the issues that led you in there. So then you still have to deal with those things. I had to really, without blaming my childhood or just even blaming this cult leader, what made me vulnerable to go in there? Because if I did not deal with the vulnerability and to this day keep it under wraps, then I'm going to replace the cult with something else negative.
It was kind of like someone who had been locked up in jail and they just got out and they don't know what social media is. They don't know how to use a cell phone, kind of thing. That's kind of how it was for us. You know, we had to kind of like start over with everything.
And the game-changing point in my life is when I met my fiance today, currently, who I'm engaged to today. And that has led me to join another church where it's been real. The experience has been a whole lot better. I've reconnected with my family.
I think everyone can relate to that. Like, everyone has gone through a crisis in their life, a time in their life where they felt lost and they were scared and they wanted a fix. It might be substance, it might be another person, it might have been addiction, it might be food. And for me, it was the cult.